Welcome! This is the first of 6 videos that take you through the process of making a bead crochet bracelet from beginning to end. We hope you'll find these videos helpful either on their own or in concert with our book, Crafting Conundrums, Puzzles and Patterns for the Bead Crochet Artist. And in the book you'll find a lot more information about how to choose patterns and how to design patterns and all of the equipment you see here. So for most of this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make something that's bigger than an actual bracelet you would wear. This is the yarn that I will be using. It's an Aran weight yarn, so it's sort of your standard moderately bulky yarn that you would find in a craft shop. Very easy to pick up. And you'll also be using a big needle like this. This is a yarn needle or tapestry needle. And here is the sort of size range of hooks that you're likely to use. The hook will have the size marked on it somewhere. On these, they're on the back, and you probably can't read this here, but this is a size J, 6 millimeter. In fact, what I would recommend that you use is a size K, but you can see it's got poor contrast for this video. So I will be using a size I because it's nice and red and easier to see, and for my purposes, perfectly fine. So for this size of equipment, you will be using these plastic craft beads. They're called pony beads that you can also pick up in most craft stores. They don't actually come in canisters like this, but I find this a useful way to store them. And here you can see some of them close up. These will be labeled as either 9 millimeter or 9 millimeter by 6 millimeter, and they're by far the most common size. And these are super easy to work with, right? Big needle, big yarn, big beads, so you just thread them as easily as that. And with this size, what you will be making is this, right? So this is a little bit big for an actual bracelet, but it's a wonderful size to learn on. And this particular pattern is color-coded to make the whole process easier. You'll see this in the videos, but it's color-coded to make it really easy to see exactly where your stitches are going to land. So it's a really good model to start off with, and that's what I will be demonstrating for most, but not all of these videos. Of course, what you'll be working towards is a bracelet that you can actually wear. And for that, you'll be using smaller beads, and so naturally a much smaller crochet hook. The size that we'd actually recommend you start with is this. It's a size 11 or a 1.1 millimeter. Again, you probably can't read that here, but it's a good size to start with. I know it might sound dauntingly small, but actually if you start with a larger needle, you may find that it's such a struggle to force it through the small stitches that you actually end up with everything tighter than if you used a larger needle, right? Or hook. This is a larger hook. This is actually a size 8, and the way the numbering goes, it's in reverse, so a size 8 is larger than a size 11, and that's what I use now, but I started with a size 11. You're also going to be using thread, and here are a couple of the options that work nicely for most bracelets. This is size 20 crochet cotton. Very nice choice for lots of bead size. It's got a lot of structure, but it's a lot harder to find, so you'll probably end up having to order this online. Lisbeth and DMC are a couple of good brands to look for. Here's what I more commonly use for most bracelets. This is a heavy-duty top stitching thread, very easy to find in fabric stores, and this brand is Gutermann, which I particularly like. It's very strong. Holds up well to both the crocheting process itself and the wear and tear when you actually start wearing the bracelet, taking it on and off over and over again. So with this yarn, you'll also naturally be using smaller needles, and you will probably need to use specialty needles for the actual beading because of how small the beads are. So for certain types of really specialty work, you'll have to use this. I know you can barely see it, but I'll show it in close-up later on. It's called a collapsing eye needle. More commonly, you'll use this big eye needle, and I'll show you how that works in just a little bit. For sewing the bracelet shut, you'll actually want to use just a more conventional large sewing needle or small tapestry needle, which has more structure. It's easier to work with, and because it doesn't actually have to pass through the beads, you can use this thicker needle, which is really helpful. It just makes the ending process a lot easier. You'll most likely be using seed beads, and those come in a couple of different ways. You might find them in vials like this. You'll often see it that way in bead shops, or else in small plastic bags like so. Both of them are fairly common. And seed beads also come in a variety of sizes. The ones in this bag here are size 8 seed beads, and that's a somewhat larger size of seed bead. It's a really good size to start with when you're doing seed bead bracelets for the first time. And so one of the nice things to do is you can take this pattern here that we did in the pony beads, do exactly the same thing in seed beads with either of the types of thread that we have here, right? And so again, it's equally easy to crochet. It's a great one to start in this size. Now, depending on your preferences, you might prefer to pick a sort of more muted set of colors that might be more like your style. It'll be a little bit trickier if you start with a more muted set of colors because it's harder to tell the colors apart. But it's your choice which of these you'd like to start with. Here we have size 11 seed beads. And again, it's like the small crochet hooks. Size 11 is smaller than size 8. Very, very common size. And here we have a slightly different type of seed bead called a delica bead. These are actually also size 11, but they're delica beads. They're precision cylinders and they're a little smaller. So let me show you both of these. So that you can sort of see them. I'll be kind of dumping them out on the cloth here, and I'll show you them in close-up as well a little bit later on. This actually is kind of how you want to work with the beads. The cloth that I'm using here as a backdrop is maybe a little thin compared to what you want to use, but you want a piece of cloth or felt or just something that will dampen the tendency of the beads to bounce around. And so these are both rather small, but they're a really nice size of bead to work with once you're comfortable with the stitch. We have tons of patterns in the book that use either size 11 seed beads or size 11 delicas. So as I said, for these, you'll want to use one of these smaller needles. This here is the Big Eye needle. And you can just kind of see against my finger, there's this big slit down the middle of the needle that I'm opening up, and that's where the thread goes in, and then you just let it close back up around it. I'll show this in more close-up later so that you can see it a little bit more clearly. And here's how you'll pick up the beads. Now, a lot of bead weavers and bead crocheters like to pick up the beads like this, just applying the needle directly to the cloth. Personally, I just prefer to pick them up. And that's just me. Different beaters are different. So for me, I'll pick up usually a few more than I need to string on and kind of fiddle around to find the holes. And so you can get them on the needle that way. In practice, what you're going to be doing is reading a pattern that will tell you which beads to string on in which order. And the book has nearly 100 different patterns in it, so there are lots of choices for what you can do there. One of the nice things about all of this is that all of these techniques that I'm showing you here will allow you to make any of a large variety of bracelets. So let me show you some of the other patterns that you can make from the book with the same stitches as these color spiral bracelets. This is a design called Bonbon Checkerboard, and it's actually made entirely of size 11 seed beads, so just like these pink beads here. It's actually a fairly simple pattern to work with when you're first starting to do more complicated patterns, and it's one that we recommend in the book as a good starter pattern for that. It's also something we'll see in the later videos a little bit more. This is called Gliding Vines, and this bracelet is actually made entirely out of the size 11 delica beads, so like the dark blue beads that are above it. And you can see there's this kind of nice effect because one of the colors is metallic, so you get this nice sheen. You can actually also make bracelets with beads that aren't strictly speaking seed beads. So this right here is a bracelet, it's a pattern called Brick Walkway, and it's actually made out of sterling silver rounds and glass rounds. They're a more spherical shaped bead. And all of these are made using exactly the same stitches. So once you learn how to make these simple color spiral bracelets in this video, you'll be able to make any one of these by just changing the beads in the stringing order and the thread. So here's a closer view of those beading needles and the small beads. Here's the Big Eye needle, and just so that you can see this a little bit better, you can see there's the Big Eye. It's a long slit down the length of the needle, and to thread it, you just open up that big slit, pass the yarn through, and then let it collapse and settle the yarn down in the bottom. And there you are. And that's a good size needle for all of these different types of seed beads that I was showing you. However, there are some beads that have holes that are just too small. So for example, these right here, these are gemstone rounds. They're actually black onyx 2mm rounds, and you can't even see the holes here. They're so tiny. So these will more traditionally, the gemstone rounds come on individual strands like this instead of in bags or vials. So for this, you'll be using this collapsing eye needle, which is much, much smaller. And you'll see this is why you don't want to use it unless you absolutely have to, because it's very, very flexible, which makes it a little bit harder to work with, right? But it's got this fairly large hole in it, and you just put the yarn through the big hole. Hold the frayed end together a little bit, and it'll go through just fine. And then you pull it back towards the base. There's a little tiny counter loop that holds the yarn. So now it's threaded. And so now I will pick up the black onyx, and I don't think I can hold this so that you can see. And honestly, I'm not even really looking. I do this mostly by feel, so I'm kind of fiddling around to find that hole, which sometimes takes a little while. Ah, there we are. So now it's on the needle, and you can see there it is just above the eye, and the eye is also flexible, so it will collapse, hence the collapsing eye needle. And there is your onyx threaded perfectly nicely. For size comparison, this is that larger sewing needle that I was showing you, and that is a perfectly acceptable size because it doesn't actually have to pass through any beads.